Goes out to all the parents out there. When was the last time you had a discussion with your young child about consent, about boundaries, about sexual abuse? This is a conversation that actually has to happen. This is not this magical fairy unicorn that doesn't get spoken about, and only if it happens do we discuss it. This is something that needs to be educated, that needs to be discussed, and needs to be confronted with your young children. Now, today I want to discuss boundaries. Now, this is a very practical task that you can do with your children and explain what a boundary is. What I would suggest is really simplifying it to the age of the child, but setting a boundary is setting a line where you are either comfortable or not comfortable with something and explaining that it's a limit. It's to say that, no, it makes me feel uncomfortable and I don't want it to happen this way. Simple boundaries that you can give example of is, first you identify what makes the child uncomfortable. For example, I don't like to kiss Uncle Bob hello. Then you could say, I don't like to kiss Uncle Bob hello, so I give him a high five. So you've set a boundary for the child to understand that this is what they do not like, and this is what they will do instead. Now, setting these boundaries gives the child power over themselves, but you obviously need to support that, as they are only an adolescent, they are only a child, they are a minor. But understanding what a boundary is and discussing that there is a line that they will not allow someone to cross because it makes them feel uncomfortable and it doesn't make them feel safe is very important. So what I would do is sit down and discuss what a boundary is. Give them an example. Find out what makes them feel uncomfortable from the people around them. These are also red flags, signals, warning signs. So please listen to your child here. If a certain person makes them cringe, shrink in their skin, makes them uncomfortable, understand that this is the child not wanting to be around this person or not wanting to act as that person is asked. So please let them have permission over their own body. Teach them that they have permission over their own body and no one else gets a right over their own body. Explain to them their body parts. Explain to them the actual boundaries around their body parts, about touching, about their breasts, their penises, their vaginas, their bum. Ask them, has anyone ever touched them? Ask them, are they understanding of where these parts are on their body? Ask them or discuss with them these body parts and say, this is for only if we're going to a doctor to get a medical checkup and I'm there with you and we give them permission. But otherwise, if someone touches you here, no. And please to communicate that with you. So if it has happened, that's okay. Talk to me. Let me know what's happened so we can discuss it and we can find out what's happened. Not that they're in the wrong. Because the first thing they need to know is the boundary. They need to understand what it is that they don't want, then the boundary. Then if someone has crossed it, that it's not their fault. That they may not have had the power to stop that person from crossing the boundary. Maybe they didn't understand the boundary. Remember, we're talking about young children here. So if we explain to them what a boundary is, we define their definition of a boundary with examples, then they can be comfortable to explain, oh, someone crossed this line, or no, I don't like this, so I want to set a boundary, and let them be vocal and communicate them, and then give them the freedom and the comfort and the safety to come to you and say, someone's crossed this boundary or this line, or I want to set a new boundary or a line because I feel uncomfortable. It is such an important discussion to have. And the reality is, even with these boundaries, things can go wrong. But I promise you that if you do give them the opportunity, the education, the information, they will be stronger out of a problem if it does occur. My example being, I was 5 years old when my parents had that discussion with me. I'll never forget. I was sitting at the dinner table and they had this clear discussion about no one's allowed to touch you, no one's allowed to do this. They explained these boundaries. Now, unfortunately, 2 years later, I became a victim and that happened for 7 years. But then I did have the power to speak out and feel comfortable to tell my parents when I was ready. That's because they set up some baseline foundations. So the reality is, the hard truth is, even with boundaries, things can go wrong, but by setting boundaries, you set up a good foundation for that child. You set up better channels of communication, and you do set up protection. And then we work from there. So again, these boundaries allow the child to know they have control over their body, to allow them to have a conversation with you and to know the difference between what makes them feel comfortable and what doesn't, and then what is right and wrong. Please talk to your children.